Hi everyone, I'm Zen, your astrologer, and welcome to your horoscope for the week of April 19th, 2021. We have a really active sky playing out all throughout the week. Just as we begin the week, we already have the first energy shift, Mercury leaving the sign of Aries and entering into the sign of Taurus, followed by the Sun the next day. And on the 24th of April, Mars leaves the sign of Gemini and enters into the sign of Cancer. Now, this week is going to shift the focus, the energy, and the astrological influence from the cardinal fiery sign of Aries onto the fixed earth sign of Taurus. And if you remember the last couple of horoscopes, I spoke about the symbolism of Aries, self-empowerment, owning our power, refining our will, honesty to the self, new goals, new dreams, new initiatives, new beginnings, taking action, perfecting plans, perhaps creating new alliances, fighting for our rights, our sovereignty, our dignity, whatever it is that we want. And of course, this is both individually and collectively. And the way it played out collectively, especially with this week's Eris and Pluto square, where Eris was conjunct first by Venus, then by the Sun and Mercury, we could see the tension, we could see the violence in some places. Certain governments broke up, political warfare, internally speaking, like members of the same government, maybe the same political party, rebelling against each other, chaos. Then of course there was people taking to the streets and fighting for their rights, demanding their voices to be heard. Then we also had this growing tension at the Black Sea, where Russia sent out ships and it started to contest certain territories. And yes, this is also Eris and Pluto, but at the same time, this is also one of the manifestations of the Mars and Neptune square. Neptune in the sign of Pisces. It means seas and territory overseas. Mars is war and tension. And naturally, this square also played out individually as well, where we had to really ambition ourselves, motivate ourselves to fight against our limitations. For some people, this were inner limitations like the past traumas, everything that made them feel powerless, everything that basically took away a healthy sense of self-worth. For other people, it was something external. It was, for example, like power games in a couple, who has power over who. And for some people, it played out in their jobs, careers, where they might have clashes with superiors, bosses, managers. Some people even decided to leave their job and just try their best to start something new. A lot of people broke old habits under this energy, but of course this was uncomfortable. This was not the positive side of Aries, where, you just embody the inner power, the courage, the passion, the ambition, and you go out there and do it. Of course, this is also part of it, but when we go out and do it, we immediately are faced with the challenges, Pluto in Capricorn. So most of us had a really tough time, either psychologically or materially, or, trying our very best to accomplish our plans. For some people, perhaps the biggest obstacle was time, where paperwork or something they wanted to do with their business was just put on hold because it got stuck. The paperwork got stopped, the communication got stopped when Eris was conjunct Mercury especially. Or for other people, the legislative changes didn't favor them, or for example, something like an aid or a facilitation of certain procedures promised by the government didn't come through in time. So this was a little bit weird because this Aries energy really empowered us to begin anew, to do whatever it is that we feel like doing, what is important for us, our dreams, our goals, whatever it is that we found inside of ourselves. But we also had to work with our options, our current possibilities, and try our hardest to overcome the challenges. And perhaps the keyword here and the main theme is try to get our powers back, Pluto. Now, as the energy shifts right at the beginning of the week, we enter into the domain of Taurus, that is fixed Earth. So this is where we have to actually make it work physically. If we had a lot of new initiatives, new ideas, new beginnings, if we discovered what we truly wanted to do to live, or basically what is worth fighting for, like our rights, equality, freedom, etc. In the sign of Taurus, we start to execute. We start to do everything within our power to make it part of our physical lives. The sign of Taurus has everything to do with our senses. So it's not just philosophical, it is very earthly, it is very telluric, so to speak. We have to live it, we have to have it, we have to experience it through our five senses. Now, first of all, Mercury into the sign of Taurus adds a lot of intellectual energy into this. So basically, all those plans that we came up with during Aries season now have to enter execution phase. But with Taurus, this does require a little bit of patience and of course timing. So this is where we're not rushing. We are going with the flow, everything at its time. If we have to wait for paperwork, if we have to wait for a credit, let's say, if we have to wait for someone to fulfill a promise, then it is what it is, as long as we stick to the plan. But of course, we're still under the Uranus-Saturn square, and I'll talk about this in more detail later on, because it comes active once again, and it is really important. So because of the square, our plans can suffer changes, we might have to readapt, we might have to improvise, and certain compromises have to be accepted. But this is all part of the plan. This doesn't really mean a massive setback or us being stopped in our tracks. Especially that very soon, as the sun enters into the sign of Taurus, it will hold a dance with Mercury. And basically that means being able to adjust and align our plans, Mercury, plans, ideas, communication, modus operandi, with our values, with basically our self-worth, what we desire to experience. And of course, we're aiming for stability, we're aiming for groundedness, and whatever our desires and plans are, may that be business, a new studies, cooperation with someone else, a new job, a new relationship, it has to be for the long-term future, it has to be stable. And the sign of Taurus, well, it has to provide us with happiness, basically. That is what it comes down to. Happiness, satisfaction, and gratitude. And this energy of clarity, because whenever the sun meets Mercury in the sky, that also means clarity. That also means some kind of personal truth, the light of our consciousness, the light of our ration, being able to guide us, show us the truth. And in the sign of Taurus, this is very earthly, it is very practical, so it is down to earth matters, especially when it comes to figures, facts, numbers, finances, banks, income, the value and worth of something. And this energy of the Sun conjunct Mercury is going to have a much greater impact on the 22nd of the month, because this is where it's not just Sun and Mercury dancing together, but Venus, the ruling planet of the sign of Taurus, the earthly Aphrodite. So everything that we love, self-esteem, value, self-worth, all of our pleasures in life, and naturally everything that we wish to have in our lives in the long-term future, our long-term, stable, grounded, safe and secure future plans. And so these three planets, Sun, Mercury and Venus, dance together with Uranus, and together they hold the square with Saturn. Now Uranus, without a shadow of a doubt, will simply energize all of these planets. So we are going to be feeling this as an urgent need for breakthrough. We need that special moment when we finally get what we desire, and not just a promise, not just seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but also at least having something physical, something concrete, something down to earth to work with. This will really, really energize us. It will energize our desires, everything that we want to attract into our lives, Venus, everything that we deserve, everything that we have worked for. If some of us have invested a lot of work, time and effort into something, it can be absolutely anything, like work, material things, a relationship, even inner work, whatever that may be. This is where we want the fruits of our labors now, because Uranus is the now. And this is also a very powerful cocktail, so to speak, because Uranus is instability as well. And this is where we are more than ready and inclined to get out of our comfort zones, do things differently. This is where we are also quite comfortable risking if there is a promise, if there is a real chance that our risks can lead us to somewhere great, somewhere better, or something big can be born out of that risk. Because, Taurus doesn't really like risk. Taurus wants to go steady but surely. Taurus wants to hit bullseye even if it takes extra time and extra effort. But this is where Uranus in this part of the sky forces the natural tendencies of Taurus to act differently than it would be natural. So we can see a lot of Taurian natives, people who have a lot of Taurus energy, doing things very differently than they usually would do. Or this is where they have the courage or the inspiration to express even their wildest thoughts. This is where they tap into their ingenuity, their inventive spirits. And since all of us have Taurus somewhere in our charts, that means that this inner impulse, the willingness to leave our comfort zones, to do things differently, to embody our most ingenious and innovative self, our visionary self, is likely to play out in all of our lives one way or another. And at the same time, an aspect which is even more important, Uranus is the planet of the higher mind, of our most refined and superior intelligence. It is the higher octave of Mercury. And whenever Mercury and Uranus meet in the sky in a conjunction, well, that is the energy when big epiphanies, big plans, big ideas, big innovative thoughts are gonna be born. It can also come as a communication. Someone inspires you. Someone gives you a really, really good idea. Or it can also be quite a metaphysical energy, if we can call it that way, because Venus is part of this picture as well, and Venus is extremely powerful in her home sign of Taurus. So that means magnetism. And when Uranus just adds pure divine electricity to to Venus's magnetism, well, this is the kind of aspect where be careful what you wish for, because you might get it in a way bigger expression that you'd even imagine. This is where the universe can truly surprise you and delight you. This is where a tiny little spark can grow into something really, really big. But of course, unfortunately, it isn't just as simple as this, because all of these planets conjunct are going to be squaring Saturn. So this will be part of the Uranus and Saturn square. And Saturn means that you really need to be able to control and discipline and basically channel and ground this ingenious and rebellious energy, regardless if it's more dominant emotionally or intellectually or even instinctually. Because if you risk, you still need a sense of security, a sense of groundedness, that even if your risk fails, it's not gonna lead to catastrophe and disaster, especially if money and material security is involved. This aspect favors risk. It favors, rolling the dice, but only if you really, really evaluate the situation, the gains and the losses. You truly put everything into perspective. You weigh the options. You weigh what you can gain and what you can lose. And basically, whatever it is that you do, whatever this risk or this, let's say, breaking away from your comfort zone is, it must not ultimately disadvantage you. Because if you risk something important like safety or livelihood, house, or something very important in your life, then you must not proceed with it, no matter how alluring, how promising the gain is. If the chances are very small, or if what you're trying to do is more of a fantasy and wishful thinking than what physical reality might permit, or the circumstances or your own personal conditions, then you should do things a little bit differently, where you're not really risking that much. Now, Venus rules money, currencies, the banking systems, everything that has to do with values. So naturally, on the world stage, whenever Venus conjuncts Uranus, especially in the sign of Taurus, that can mean a big unexpected, especially cryptocurrency, stock markets, everything that has to do with the circulation of money, everything that has to do with financial plans and tactics, where to invest, when to withdraw, when to basically withdraw in the sense that you want to finally enjoy the fruits of your labor. And Uranus conjunct Mercury gives us a very strong ability to anticipate, to calculate. It is almost like we're able to predict the future, but not through any mystical means, not through intuition. In other words, not through mysticism, but rather through life experience. If you're very, very experienced in a domain, if you have a very mathematical mind, if you were studying the markets, etc., if you have a lot of experience, or if you do not have experience, but simply have a really good sense, almost like a sixth sense with money and markets, currencies, when to invest. Basically, if you have this business in your blood, then this might be a moment of power. This might be a moment when you will just know what to do, when to do it. For example, with cryptocurrencies, with everything that has to do with money. Now, the not so favorable side to this energy is that, on the world stage, this can also represent massive losses. This can also represent an unexpected fall of currency, foreign exchange, cryptocurrency, etc. And at the same time, it can also represent that something totally new, never ever seen or experienced before regarding money and finances, of course, is gonna be born out of the blue, out of nowhere. Something just becomes dominant and extremely powerful overnight. So at this time, the 22nd of April, everyone who is into money and finances and this stuff should really pay close attention to what's going on, because there can be a lot of opportunities there, but at the same time, if there is a chance for something to crash or go haywire, you can also prevent that. So this power to anticipate can go either way. It can either protect you, save you, or help you and guide you hit the jackpot. On the 23rd of the month, the conjunction between Venus and Uranus becomes exact, and at the same time it's trined by the moon in the sign of Virgo. So it is a very powerful earth trine. And this energy can be quite lucky, quite groundbreaking. It can be that big breakthrough that you're looking for, because Virgo is practicality. Virgo is finding solutions. Virgo is mind over matter, but in a methodological, hard-working way, not in a mystical sense. And this energy can be really good exactly for what I said before, for markets and currencies, etc. But Venus is goddess of love and beauty. It can be attracting something very pleasurable in your life. It can be really good for love, especially if you're single and looking. You might find someone with the same value system, the same principles, the same things that bring you pleasure. So in other words, you can find someone who really matches you, and it can come out of the blue. It can be shocking, it can be surprising, it can be so very unexpected. And this new connection, relationship, and as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be like romantic love. If it's a business partner, a colleague, an employee, a new job, Virgo is also work. So whatever you're looking for, whatever you're trying to attract in your life, it can come from means which you might not even think about, or you might never have expected it from. Now, let me just give you a simple example. If you're single and looking, well, naturally, the internet might be the tool that you're using. It makes so much sense. Everyone is on there. So many dating sites. It's so fast. It is instant. You can share a lot of information through text and voice calls, whatever it is. So maybe you're focused on the internet, like dating sites or Tinder or whatever. And all of a sudden, a friend invites you to go out for a coffee. And you accept the invitation. But that friend has another person with them. And the connection is made the old classical way, and the spark is immediately there, and you didn't even have to touch the internet. Or let me give you another example. You're single and looking for love. Of course, you're looking for love on the internet. And one day you just go to work, and there is a new colleague there. And as soon as you introduce yourself, the spark is gonna be there. But as I said, this is just an example, and it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic love. It can be anything that you're looking for, which falls under the domain of Venus and Taurus and even Virgo. Let me give you a totally different example. Let's say that you're an artist and you're selling your art on the internet naturally, and an existing customer of yours just contacts you that someone else saw your work of art at their place or whatever and would like to, get in touch with you, contact you, and of course it happens, the connection happens, but too much to your surprise, that new customer offers you a ridiculous amount of money for something specific that they're fixated on. That is also a massive surprise because it is not direct and unexpected. Or let me give you yet another example. You buy a lottery ticket and you really need the money. And I'm not really saying the jackpot or whatever. You just want a little bit of money for something that you want to do for yourself. And the draw is there and you check the numbers and no luck. And in 10 minutes you get a phone call from your best friend that they won the jackpot. But of course, these are just examples. It can play out in so many different ways, especially because Uranus is the star of the show here. And on the 24th, the conjunction between Uranus and Mercury becomes exact. So that adds even more randomness, that adds even more open channels, so to speak, for information, connections, ideas, plans, communication to enter your life. And let's not forget, of course, it also opens your own highest potential of your intellectual sphere. So regardless of how we look at it, next week can be very surprising. Let's hope in the most positive sense. This is where the biggest and best ideas can be born. The best connections and communications can enter your life. This is where a small gesture turns into something big and colossal. And of course, the way I personally look at this energy, there can be a massive Goliath in all of our lives, that's Saturn. Something that we really want to achieve, something impossible that we want to accomplish. You know, a big giant which we normally could not really defeat. And this is where this Mercury and Venus and the Sun and Uranus are that lucky slingshot which hits the target, which hits bullseye. We can also look at this Uranus as the divine power guiding the rock, the stone, straight onto the weak spot of the giant, and that can be basically a massive shock. A small gesture might just kill the giant, and we might find ourselves surprisingly, shockingly, in a totally different state where something that has blocked us, something that has limited us, something that we have struggled with for years, for some people maybe all of their lives, is all of a sudden dead, gone, defeated. And naturally, let's just mention that there is a negative side of this energy as well, because those who are truly reckless, those who are truly way too overconfident, those who usually play with luck, with hazard, with risk, can really basically live the opposite of this. This is where the smallest mistake might defeat them personally. Because let's not forget, Saturn is karma as well. Saturn is the great cosmic judge. So those people who usually play with fire might get burned if they do not embody respect, discipline, and basically dignity under this aspect. Because this aspect does require us to know and to basically embody that life is a gift, and we are gifted with this life so that we can work with it, we can live and experience earthly life, so that we can take action, so that we can influence the earthly plane and not waste it or not really play with it. Of course, there are times in life when we do take risks and we do foolish gestures, but when we do that a lot, there are times when the universe says, not this time. So basically, this aspect favors those of us who are much more like David, those who are truly trying to accomplish something big, but with a lot of dignity, with a lot of faith in our hearts, who are actually striving and fighting for the greater good, because ultimately Saturn in Aquarius is the greater good. So the universe, the divine power, of course it will allow that David to be successful because it also wants the greater good. So Saturn submits because it is the karmic teacher. Whoever passed the exam, whoever embodied their own divinity can defeat Saturn. Who is vain, who is very, very foolish or unwise will be defeated by that Saturn. And there is another energy which goes hand in hand with this David and Goliath. At this time, Mars in the sign of Gemini is going to be in 29 degrees anaretic degree. And also Mars is out of bounds, which means that it is extremely chaotic. It is extremely powerful. It is extremely provocative, so to speak. So on one hand, on the world stage, of course, we are going to see this playing out as acts of violence, perhaps really desperate gestures, or some people's fanaticism and extreme ideologies shocking the world. But at the same time, this is also courage, and this is also the symbolism of that David, where, the sign of Gemini, one part of the twins is a half god, it is immortal, and the other twin is a god, it is a divine being. And when they unite forces, nothing is impossible. When the divine meets the earthly and they are in harmony, they are in accord, there is no impossible. And this is one of the most positive expressions of an anaretic out of bounds Mars. This is when that courage, when that divinely godly inspiration of compassion and that one single gesture, that act of self-expression, expressing your desire, especially if it serves a very noble purpose, it can hit bullseye, it can just overcome anything. Now, of course, on a more mundane level, this means angry words, this can mean problems in communication, it can mean anger, it can mean fights, even fist fights spontaneously appearing in pubs, in even public places, because Gemini does rule the hands, but it also rules communication. And when Mars is out of bounds, that one of its expressions is definitely anger. So whatever we may speak without thinking might offend really strongly other people, and they might react to that. But as I said, from a more spiritual perspective, this can be a very miraculous energy. And the next day, Mars enters into the sign of Cancer, and this is also very strong energy shift, because Mars in Cancer is all about emotions, the emotional warrior, the protector, the nurturer, he who stands up for the weak and vulnerable. Of course, the more negative side is all of us are going to be a little bit more emotionally vulnerable, more emotionally protective of ourselves. Passive aggressiveness is Mars in Cancer as well, because in this part of the sky, Mars is considered debilitated. It is in fall, so it's not able to bring forward its highest qualities. For example, a courageous, inspired action. This is where Mars is more defensive, Mars is more reactive. But one of the best parts of this energy, whenever Mars is in the sign of the Cancer and it doesn't form any bad aspects, any hard aspects with other planets, well, this is where it is the sign of the light worker, of the nurturer, of the nurse, of the doctor, of the psychologist, where we surrender a little bit of our selfishness, of our own will, of our own interests, and embody compassion, we embody solidarity, we embody empathy, and just make the lives of others richer, nicer, more beautiful. This is where we add a bit more value and beauty and emotional comfort onto the lives of others. And since Mars is out of bounds and Cancer is people, unity, a community, this means the power of the people will definitely start building up. But what's more important, this is where compassion, empathy, and people wanting to protect one another, people loving and feeling empathy for one another will form this unity. And all of this also happens under a still Pluto. Pluto standing still in the sky, preparing to go retrograde. So Pluto is going to be extremely powerful. So it will be a very powerful moment when people will unite for one single purpose and they will get their power back. Pluto standing still in the sky, the power. A power of unity that can do basically anything. So basically this is setting the stage for what is about to come next. Because in the weeks to follow, especially around the super full moon in the sign of Scorpio, when a lot of secrets are gonna be revealed, people will react, people will respond, but in a very solitary, in a very unified and harmonious way, where they will just seek each other's greater good, protection and well-being. But that is another page of the story. That is next week's horoscope. And finally, I would also like to mention that this week, without a shadow of a doubt, everything is going to be about values. Everything is going to be about money. Everything is going to be about whatever brings us joy and pleasure and helps us feel alive quite physically, because this is where we have the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Dark Moon, Lilith, and Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So another deeply concentrated energy. This is where financially and economically and even regarding values, things are definitely going to be changing. This is yet another stepping stone of what this year 2021 has in store for us. And also, as these planets are starting to conjunct Uranus, Uranus in the fixed earthly sign of Taurus always represents tectonic movement, seismic activities. So as we're approaching this super full moon in Scorpio, the risk of earthquakes, the risk of volcanic eruptions, the risk of even tsunamis, because Neptune is in the sign of Pisces and Mars has entered Cancer, another water sign, it is going to increase. The peak is going to be around that super full moon in Scorpio. But even before things get there, we might experience smaller or less violent earthquakes or movements of the earth or anything which has to do with very unusual weather phenomenon as we progress through the week. But as we get to the super full moon in Scorpio, that might be a moment when something bigger, something quite catastrophic might happen somewhere in the world. And if you would like to know where in the world chances are greater for this to take place, I recommend the horoscopes and astrological work of Pam Gregory, one of the most amazing and talented astrologers who has knowledge of astrocartography, if I pronounce this correctly, which basically tells us which astrological dances affect a certain area, like a country or a geographical position the most. So I really recommend her channel and her work to everyone because she is absolutely amazing. With this being said, I thank you so very much for listening. Thank you for all the likes, all the shares, all the beautiful comments. If you'd like to support my work and my channel, feel free to donate by using the PayPal link in the description of this video. Everyone who donates will be automatically included in a ritual of gratitude that I hold every single week, sending love and prosperity to everyone who supported me. Thank you once again. Wish everyone an amazing and magical week. Until next time, bye for now.